were last seen on the edge of a hill that no longer exists. A stretch of ground, now buried beneath asphalt and concrete, once held an opening in the limestone where the wind blew cold and steady even in May. 3 boys stood there with a flashlight, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and the kind of reckless curiosity that belongs only to children. They laughed as they slipped beyond the line of sight, ducking under the half-collapsed frame of what used to be a mining shaft. No one ever saw them again. The day was May 10th, 1967, Hannibal, Missouri, a place people now associate with Mark Twain, riverboats, and the kind of American nostalgia printed on postcards. But beneath that polished image lies a far older city, a city carved not only into the hills but beneath them, a city that grew above a labyrinth of caves and tunnels, some natural, some carved out by men over a century before, some mapped, many forgotten. The boys' names were Joey Hogue, age 13, his younger brother Billy, 11, and their neighbor and friend, Craig Dowell, 14. They lived within 2 blocks of each other in a neighborhood that leaned against the southern edge of town. For weeks, they had been watching the construction site where Highway 79 was being expanded. The machines were cutting into the hills, breaking open pockets of limestone that hadn't seen light in decades. Construction workers had found hollow places behind the rock, spaces where the ground seemed to breathe. One foreman wrote in his journal later, "We drilled into solid stone and hit a wall of wind. Cold, heavy, like the kind you feel before a storm." Joey was fascinated by caves. He had spent the previous summer exploring a small network of old tunnels with Billy and Craig, using flashlights and stolen candles. They had memorized routes, marked rocks with chalk, treated the underground like their own secret kingdom. The construction site offered something new. Freshly opened tunnels, unmarked, undocumented, wide enough for a boy to crawl through and perhaps stand up inside. The kind of mystery too heavy to resist. On May 9th, the day before the disappearance, the boys had been caught trying to sneak past the barrier. A neighbor, Mrs. Barnhart, pulled them away by their collars and scolded them. She told their parents. Joey's father grounded him for the night. Joey wrote something in his notebook before bed. Later, when the police searched his room, they found it on the nightstand. One line, scribbled in uneven handwriting. "There's a way down. Real air. Cold as the river." On the afternoon of May 10th, the boys met after school at Craig's house. Craig wore his red t-shirt with the tear near the shoulder. Joey carried the flashlight. Billy had the sandwich. They told their parents they were going to the hill. It was a familiar phrase. They often played outside until sunset. No one thought much of it. Around 5:15 p.m., 2 local men, brothers themselves named Clifford and Harold Baker, saw 3 boys near the site, standing just outside a rope line set up by the road crew. One of the boys was waving the flashlight in the air. The men thought nothing of it. 20 minutes later, a third witness, a teenage girl walking home, heard laughter echoing from inside the shaft. When she looked toward the hill, the boys were gone. By 7:30, when they hadn't returned for dinner, Joey and Billy's father went looking. He walked the streets, checked with neighbors, called Craig's home. All 3 families assumed the boys were somewhere nearby. By 8 o'clock, flashlights appeared in front yards. By 9 o'clock, the first call to the Hannibal Police Department was made. The initial search began with a few officers' parents and neighbors. They checked the riverbank, the park, the streets between the homes. The construction site was fenced off, but Joey's father found footprints in the mud near the entrance to the shaft. 3 sets, all pointing in, none pointing out. The shaft itself was nothing more than a rough oval, reinforced with cracked wooden beams and loose earth. One could crouch inside and quickly disappear from view. A few feet in, the darkness became complete. Officer James Fowler, one of the first to crawl in, later told a reporter, "I thought I heard something move down there, like air shifting. I called out. No one answered." That night, the search expanded. Volunteers formed a line along the river and combed the area with lanterns. The local civil defense unit brought ropes and radios. At 11 p.m., rain began to fall, light at first, then steady. The mud along the hillside grew slick. By midnight, the opening was nearly impassable. They pulled the men out, promising to return at first light. May 11th began with helicopters. By sunrise, the Missouri State Highway Patrol, the Hannibal Police, and more than 100 volunteers were gathered at the site. The opening had partially collapsed overnight. Engineers from the Army Corps were called in to stabilize the tunnel. Search dogs were lowered inside. Nothing. Officials widened the search. If the boys had emerged elsewhere, they might have wandered toward the river or deeper into the cave system. But there were no fresh tracks, no scraps of clothing, no sandwich wrapper, no flashlight. It was as though they had walked into the earth and ceased to exist. Hannibal's underground is not a single cave. It is a lattice, a network, an organism. In the 1800s, miners carved tunnels for limestone, chasing veins through the hills without proper maps. Over time, new passages formed, old ones collapsed, sections flooded. When the quarries closed, they sealed a few entrances, but not all. The older residents warned their children to stay out of the hills, saying the ground had bad breath, meaning the air was thin and treacherous. But stories grew from warnings. And by the 1960s, every child in Hannibal knew at least one legend about the tunnels. One of those stories told of a passage beneath Riverview Park, where if you stood inside long enough, you could hear whispers in the dark. Another said there were shafts that led straight to the river, water swirling in black silence. When construction began, rumors spread again. Kids whispered about the breathing caves. Adults called them dangerous, unstable, a liability. The boys called them adventure. The search effort grew desperate. On May 12th, a massive rescue operation began. Professional spelunkers were brought in from across Missouri and Illinois. Teams with oxygen masks and specialized lighting crawled through openings, cataloging each shaft. Several collapsed passages were discovered. One rescue worker described the air inside as heavy, like standing at the bottom of a well. Dogs picked up a scent trail near the entrance but lost it less than 30 feet in. The parents waited at the perimeter. Reporters arrived from St. Louis. Photographers documented the dig site, the ropes, the mud-stained boots of rescue teams. By the third day, local newspapers printed the boys' faces on the front page with the headline, "3 Hannibal Boys Lost in Tunnels." On May 13th, an Army Corps engineer named Raymond Cook found something deep in one of the side shafts, a scrap of red fabric caught on a splinter of wood. The Dowell family was called in to identify it. It matched the tear on Craig's shirt. Search teams flooded the shaft. They dug for hours, expanding the opening, propping up collapsing beams with lumber. But beyond the place where the fabric was found, the tunnel simply ended. Not in a wall, not in rock. In void. A hollow drop filled with cold air and darkness. They lowered lights. Nothing reflected back. Raymond Cook wrote in his notes later, "It didn't feel like a tunnel. It felt like the inside of something alive. The way the air moved, like breathing that night, The rescue teams reported hearing distant tapping underground. 3 knocks. Then silence. Then 3 again. They believed it was echoes from their own work. The parents didn't believe that. At 2 a.m., volunteers begged to keep digging. Officials ordered them out. Too unstable. The search continued for 10 days. Shafts were widened. Others collapsed as fast as they were opened. In several places, teams found sealed wooden doors deep underground. Old quarry doors nailed shut decades earlier. Some opened into rooms of damp limestone. Others into flooded pits. None held the boys. As days turned to weeks, the tone changed. The first days had been filled with the language of rescue. After day 10, it became the language of recovery. Then quietly, the language of resignation. On May 23rd, after 13 days of searching, the official rescue operation was suspended. The police chief held a press conference. He said the boys were presumed dead, lost in the labyrinth of caves beneath the city. He assured the families that the search would continue as conditions allowed. It didn't, but the families didn't stop. Joey and Billy's father returned to the site every day for weeks. He carried his own flashlight, crawled into shafts alone at night. One witness later told a reporter he heard the man calling their names in the darkness. Just a single voice against an entire underground. Throughout June, strange rumors grew around town. Some said workers at the highway site had unearthed something they shouldn't have. Some said old miners had begged the city not to dig there. A few claimed they'd heard sounds underground. Knocking, distant crying. The echo of footsteps that didn't belong to search teams. The last recorded official exploration of the tunnels took place on June 22nd. A team of engineers and cavers mapped several new chambers. One of them, marked only as Shaft 12B, was described as a pocket of unknown depth with strong air movement and unstable walls. No team descended into it. The opening was sealed with concrete 2 weeks later. The town of Hannibal quietly moved on. Highway 79 was completed. The hillside was reshaped. Houses rose where the search tents once stood. But for the families of the boys, the ground itself remained a wound. Billy and Joey's mother kept their bedroom untouched for years. Craig's parents moved away in 1971. In the decades that followed, pieces of the story surfaced like fragments of bone after a rainstorm. In 1982, a construction worker claimed to have found a wooden beam underground with 3 initials carved into it: JH, BH, and CD. The shaft was sealed before anyone could verify the claim. In 1999, a retired police officer told a journalist that there had been pressure from mad city officials to limit how deep the search teams went, citing structural concerns. No documents support this, but the rumor remains. Locals say the tunnels under Hannibal still breathe. On quiet nights, if you stand near the hillside, the air escapes through unseen cracks, cold and steady like an exhale. Some say if you listen long enough, you'll hear children's voices beneath it. Others don't listen at all. There is no evidence of foul play, no evidence of accident, no evidence at all. The official explanation remains unchanged. The boys entered the tunnel, became lost in the labyrinth, and died underground. But the ground never gave them back. Even now, over half a century later, no remains have been found. Not a shoe, not a bone, not a scrap of flashlight. The shaft where they vanished was buried under layers of highway and concrete. But the tunnels are still down there, spreading like roots in the dark. And the wind still breathes through them. Some say what swallows. People doesn't always leave traces. Some things just take By the summer of 1967, the search for the 3 missing boys had become more than a tragedy. It was an obsession. People in Hannibal stopped walking near the construction zone. Parents kept their children inside after dark. The caves beneath the city, once a source of boyish adventure, became the mouth of something unholy. Newspapers across Missouri printed the same line again and again. No evidence found. Weeks passed, then months. And like all small towns under pressure, Hannibal began to change. The laughter disappeared from its streets. Business slowed. Tourists stopped coming. Mark Twain's cheerful caves became cursed ground. The townspeople didn't talk about the boys anymore, not in public at least. But in kitchens and church basements, the whispers continued. They said the boys had been taken by the tunnels themselves, that the miners of 100 years ago had disturbed something ancient, that the caves weren't empty at all, but hollow in another way, like lungs or a throat, something that wanted to breathe, something that wanted to be fed. In October of that same year, a journalist named Ellen Stark came to Hannibal from St. Louis. She had covered industrial accidents and missing persons before, but this case unsettled her. She requested access to police reports and interviewed the Hogue and Dowell families. Her articles never made it past her editor. Too bleak, they said. But her notes survived. In one entry dated October 11th, she wrote, "Every man I've spoken to swears the tunnels change. One foreman told me, we sealed one entrance on Monday, came back Wednesday, and there was a hole on the opposite side, big enough for a truck. I checked the site myself. The ground breathes. I felt it, like standing over a vent. Only there's no wind and no sound of air moving, just pressure. Like something waiting. Stark's research uncovered old maps, hand-drawn mining plans from the 1880s. Most of them were incomplete, but one stood out. It showed a system of tunnels extending miles under the south side of Hannibal, intersecting near the spot where the boys vanished. At the center of the map, someone had written a word in faint pencil: hollow. Stark found a retired miner named Earl Mathis, who had worked in those tunnels as a young man. He was nearly 80 by then, living in a trailer outside Palmyra. His hands trembled as he spoke. "We were told not to go past the 12th shaft," he said. "Something down there. A sound like a bell, only deeper. The air burned your throat. We lost 2 men once, never found them. The boss told us to close it up. Said the ground was bad." When Stark asked where the 12th shaft had been, he pointed to the same hill later used for the Route 79 cut. She asked him what he meant by, "The ground was bad." He looked out the window for a long time before answering. "Bad like it remembers," he said. The following winter, a state geologist named Dr. Marvin Keller was hired by the Missouri Highway Department to survey the stability of the area. His internal report, unreleased until 1974, described unusual geological features beneath Hannibal. He wrote, "Several pockets of hollow limestone appear to have been carved out by more than erosion. Their symmetry suggests deliberate excavation, though no records exist. Acoustic tests indicate deep chambers at non-natural frequencies of resonance, low, rhythmic, sustained. The effect is unsettling, as though the rock itself hums." The report was quietly archived, stamped for internal use only. A month later, Keller resigned. In early 1968, nearly a year after the disappearance, heavy rainfall caused flooding in parts of Hannibal. Mudslides exposed a narrow fissure along the old construction site. Residents reported hearing a hollow roar beneath the water runoff. One man claimed he saw steam rise from the ground. like the earth exhaled. Authorities inspected the area but found nothing unusual. The fissure sealed itself within days. Still, rumors spread again. People said it was the tunnels reopening, that the boys were still down there trapped in the dark, calling out from behind the walls. Some claimed they could hear them on still nights. 3 voices faintly echoing in sequence. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks. By 1970, Hannibal had buried the memory under layers of routine. But one family refused to let go. Margaret Hogue, the boy's mother, kept a box in her bedroom closet containing every clipping, every photo, every letter related to the case. She wrote the governor, senators, the FBI. She even hired a private investigator named Thomas Avery, a former state trooper with a reputation for handling cold ground cases, old disappearances tied to strange locations. Avery arrived in Hannibal on April 4th, 1970. He stayed in the Hotel Mark Twain. His notes, later recovered from his estate, paint a picture of quiet obsession. "Locals won't talk after dark," he wrote. "They claim they still feel the tunnels underfoot. One woman says her basement hums. Another says her son dreamed of 3 boys standing in water whispering, 'We didn't go alone.' I think the town itself is sick." Avery spent 3 weeks collecting witness statements. Then, without official permission, he broke into the old construction zone, by then fenced and overgrown, and descended through a drainage culvert that led into the lower tunnels. He was never seen again. The next morning, his car was found abandoned near the site. The driver's door open. Inside, his notebook, damp and smeared with mud. Only one legible sentence remained on the last page. "It moves when you're not looking." The Hogue family held a memorial that summer, though no graves were filled. The Dowells moved away. The site was paved over for good. The tunnels beneath Hannibal fell silent, at least on paper. Then came the fire. On March 3rd, 1973, the Hannibal Historical Records Office caught fire in the middle of the night. The blaze destroyed hundreds of archived documents, including early mining maps, property ledgers, and geological surveys. The cause was ruled electrical malfunction. No fire alarm had sounded. A watchman on duty later told investigators that just before the fire broke out, he had felt a rush of cold air from the basement. He said it smelled of iron and wet stone. No one believed him. Decades passed. Time smoothed the edges. The town rebuilt, repainted, rebranded. But under the calm surface, something kept stirring. In 1999, a storm caused part of the highway embankment to collapse, exposing another cave mouth. City engineers sealed it immediately, citing safety concerns. Before they did, one worker took a photograph with a disposable camera. The photo, later leaked online, shows a smooth limestone wall marked by what appear to be carvings, 3 parallel lines, each descending into a curve, like initials or tally marks. In 2003, urban explorers from Illinois claimed to have entered the sealed tunnels at night. They uploaded a brief video before it was removed. The footage, grainy and dim, shows a man crawling through mud, breathing hard. Then, faintly, 3 distinct taps echo in the distance. The man laughs nervously, says, "That's not us," and the video cuts out. The uploader later deleted his account. By the 2000s, the case of the Hannibal children had become an urban legend. Podcasts, documentaries, late-night radio shows all retold it as folklore. But the details never changed. 3 boys, 1 tunnel, no return. In 2014, the Missouri Department of Conservation authorized a limited survey of underground air currents around Hannibal. The data, though scientific, carried an eerie implication. Barometric pressure sensors recorded rhythmic fluctuations in the limestone cavities, pulses every 28 seconds, consistent with a pattern of exhalation and inhalation. The lead researcher dismissed it as natural resonance, but the report's final line reads differently. The pressure shifts continued for 12 hours after the equipment was removed. Today, the hill where the boys vanished is unremarkable. Cars pass above it every minute. Children ride bicycles over the same ground where the earth once opened its mouth. There's a gas station nearby, a church, a diner with a Mark Twain mural on the wall. Life returned. But the locals still know where it happened. They lower their voices when they talk about it. And if you mention the names Billy, Joey, or Craig, someone will always correct you, quietly, without meeting your eyes. They didn't get lost. They went somewhere according to official archives. The case remains open under missing persons presumed deceased. But there's one final record, dated July 12th, 2017. A maintenance crew inspecting storm drains along Route 79 reported hearing metallic tapping from beneath the pavement. 3 taps, spaced evenly apart. They called it in. By the time investigators arrived, the sound had stopped. Later that week, one of the crewmen quit his job. In his resignation note, he wrote, "The ground is breathing again. Some truths never find light. Some disappear into the spaces between maps, between memories, between breaths of the living earth." The Hogue brothers and Craig Dowell became part of that darkness long ago. But the wind still comes through the cracks in Hannibal, cold and steady, carrying with it the rhythm of something older than the town, older than the river, older than names. And if you stand there long enough on a quiet night with no cars, no voices, no wind, you might hear it. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 again. And that is when you'll understand why no one goes near the hill after dark. If you found this story, remember, some places were buried for a reason. Stay above ground.